The massive alien ship dropped out of hyperspace like a dark mountain appearing in the void. Admiral Thexvar stood on the bridge of the Vexhai, his four eyes gleaming with satisfaction as he stared at the small blue planet below. His thick, gray skin rippled with anticipation. "Such a primitive world," he said to his second-in-command, Officer Kelnox. "Their radio signals show they can barely leave their own atmosphere. This will be easy." Thexvar had conquered 12 worlds for the Zephyrian Empire. This would be the 13th. The humans below had no idea what was coming. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Target their largest cities first." The first wave of Zephyrian fighters screamed down through Earth's atmosphere, their plasma weapons charged up, ready to turn human cities into ash. But something went wrong almost immediately. Captain Lee Dong-wook was working in an asteroid mining station when the attack began. He saw the alien ships coming and did something impossible. Using only mining lasers and cargo haulers, he somehow managed to disable 3 enemy fighters. The aliens couldn't understand how primitive mining equipment could hurt their advanced ships. "Sir, we're losing fighters," Kelnox reported, his voice filled with confusion. "The humans are using mining tools?" On Earth's surface, Lieutenant Park So-young found herself face-to-face with crashed alien technology. She had never seen anything like it before. The weapon in her hands was completely foreign, covered in strange symbols and made of materials that didn't exist on Earth. But somehow, within minutes, she understood how it worked. She turned the alien plasma rifle against its creators and began picking off Zephyrian soldiers one by one. Private Kim Jin-ho was even more puzzling. He found pieces of a destroyed alien communication device scattered across a battlefield. The technology was thousands of years ahead of anything humans had ever built. The symbols meant nothing to him. The materials were unknown. Yet somehow, he managed to rebuild it into a working radio. Not only that, but he figured out how to use it to coordinate attacks between different human military units. "This is impossible," Thexvar muttered, watching the reports flow in. "They're adapting to our technology faster than our own engineers." The humans weren't just learning to use alien weapons, they were improving them. Sergeant Oh Min-seo took a Zephyrian energy shield generator and somehow made it work better than the original design. She didn't understand the science behind it. She just touched it, and it responded. Corporal Han Bo-ra did something even stranger. She was captured by a group of Zephyrian soldiers, but instead of being killed, she somehow convinced them to let her go. She didn't speak their language, they didn't speak hers. But something in her eyes, something in the way she looked at them, made the alien soldiers feel wrong about hurting her. The battle that should have lasted hours stretched into days. Every time the Zephyrians thought they had the upper hand, the humans surprised them again. Tech specialist Kang Do-hyun walked up to a Zephyrian computer terminal and placed his hand on it. The advanced alien computer system, protected by security measures no human should have been able to break, simply opened up and gave him access. "How are they doing this?" Kelnox asked, his voice shaking. Thexvar had no answer. In all his conquests, he had never seen anything like this. The humans weren't winning because they were stronger or had better weapons. They were winning because they seemed to understand alien technology better than the aliens who built it. Private Lim Soo-jin walked through an energy barrier that should have killed her instantly. She emerged on the other side without a scratch, looking as confused as everyone else about how she had survived. Commander Jang Soo-bin led a small team into a heavily defended Zephyrian base. They had no plan, no advanced weapons, and no hope of success. Yet somehow they not only survived but managed to capture the entire facility. The alien defenders laid down their weapons and surrendered, though none of them could explain why. "Sir," came a terrified voice over the communication system. "The humans? They're not fighting like any species we've encountered. They're doing things that shouldn't be possible." Thexvar looked at the tactical display showing his fleet's losses. Ships that had conquered worlds were being destroyed by humans using converted farming equipment and modified civilian spacecraft. His most advanced fighters were falling to human pilots who had learned to fly them in minutes. "Retreat," he ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Fall back to the outer system." As the Zephyrian fleet pulled away from Earth, Thexvar stared. at the small blue planet with new eyes. These weren't the primitive creatures he had expected to conquer. There was something different about humans, something that allowed them to adapt and improvise in ways that defied everything he knew about warfare and technology. "What are they?" Kelnox whispered. Thexvar didn't answer. He couldn't answer. All he knew was that he had just encountered something that changed everything he thought he understood about the universe. Dr. Velthar walked slowly around the containment cell, his 6 tentacles twitching with nervous energy. Inside the transparent barrier sat a human female named Choi Hee-jin. She looked completely calm, as if being captured by aliens was nothing unusual. "Subject has been confined for 3 days," Velthar spoke into his recording device. "She shows no signs of stress or fear. This is abnormal." What made it even stranger was what Choi Hee-jin was doing. Using her fingernail, she had scratched complex mathematical equations into the metal wall of her cell. Velthar had run the equations through the ship's most advanced computers. They were solving problems that Zephyrian scientists had been working on for decades. "How does she know these formulas?" he muttered to himself. Science Officer Crixon entered the laboratory carrying a stack of ancient data tablets. His usually steady hands were shaking slightly. "Doctor, you need to see this," Crixon said, setting the tablets down on the examination table. "I've been searching through our oldest archives, looking for anything that might explain what we're seeing." Velthar picked up one of the tablets. The writing on it was so old that most Zephyrians couldn't read it anymore. It told stories from the beginning of their civilization, tales that most people thought were just myths. "The creator species," Crixon said quietly. "According to these records, they were the first intelligent life in our galaxy. They had abilities that seemed magical to other races." Velthar had heard these stories as a child. Ancient beings who could understand any technology just by looking at it. Creatures who could inspire others to do impossible things. Gods who walked among the stars until they mysteriously vanished eons ago. "These are just old stories," Velthar said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Look at this." Crixon pointed to a section of text. "It describes the theoretical neural patterns of the creator species, the way their brains would work, the electrical signals they would produce." Velthar compared the ancient text to the brain scans of their human prisoners. His blood turned cold. The patterns were identical. In the cell, Choi Hee-jin had stopped, scratching equations, and was now humming softly to herself. The melody was simple, almost childlike, but something impossible was happening. The ship's computer systems were responding to her humming. Lights flickered in rhythm with her tune. The air circulation system adjusted its flow to match her breathing. "The machines are listening to her," Velthar whispered in amazement. In the cell next to hers, another human prisoner named Yoon Taiho was studying the energy barrier that kept him trapped. He wasn't trying to break it or damage it. He was just watching it, learning how it worked. After 2 hours of patient observation, he reached out and touched a specific spot on the barrier. It flickered and went off for exactly 3 seconds, before coming back on. "He's not breaking the system," Crixon observed. "He's communicating with it." Velthar pulled up more brain scans from other human prisoners. Every single one showed the same impossible neural activity. Their creativity centers were working at levels that should have burned out their brains. Their problem-solving abilities were off every chart the Zephyrians had. "Run a comparison," Velthar ordered the computer. "Compare human neural patterns with the theoretical creator brain structure from the ancient texts." The computer worked for several minutes before displaying the results. The match was 97% accurate. "This can't be right," Velthar said, staring at the display. "The creators disappeared millions of years ago." But the evidence was right in front of him. In another cell, a human named Park So-young was somehow making friends with her Zephyrian guards. She didn't speak their language, and they didn't speak hers, but she had convinced them to bring her extra food and better bedding. One guard had even started teaching her basic Zephyrian words. "She's inspiring loyalty across species barriers," Crixon noted. "Just like the old stories said the creators could do." The most disturbing case was Kim Jin-ho. He had been given a broken piece of Zephyrian technology to see what he would do with it. Instead of trying to use it as a weapon or tool, he had simply held it in his hands for an hour. When he finally set it down, the device started working again. Not just working, but working better than it had when it was new. He fixed it by touching it, Velthar said in disbelief. No tools, no training, no understanding of how it works. He just fixed it. Velthar looked at all the evidence spread before him. The ancient texts, the brain scans, the impossible things these humans were doing. There was only one conclusion, but it was too frightening to accept. Doctor, Crixon said quietly, what if the creators didn't disappear? What if they chose to limit themselves somehow? What if they took physical form and evolved? Velthar stared at the human prisoners through the transparent barriers. They looked so ordinary, so weak and small. But the evidence was undeniable. These weren't just another alien species that the Zephyrian Empire could conquer. These were the descendants of gods, and something was waking them up. Commander Jiang Subin stood in the smoking ruins of what had been the most heavily defended Zephyrian military base on Mars. 6 months ago, this fortress had been considered impossible to capture. Now his small team of human soldiers was accepting the surrender of alien warriors who had been fighting wars for centuries. Sir? Sergeant O Minseo approached him, her face showing a mixture of confusion and wonder. The remaining Zephyrian soldiers want to talk. They're saying something strange about us speaking to their machines. Jiang Subin nodded slowly. He had seen it happen with his own eyes, but he still couldn't believe it. Tech specialist Kang Do-hyun had walked up to the base's main computer system, a massive alien machine protected by security codes that should have taken years to crack. Kang had simply placed his hand on the metal surface and asked it politely to let them in. The computer had said yes, not in words that anyone could hear, but somehow everyone knew that's what had happened. The security doors had opened. The defensive weapons had powered down. The entire base had simply surrendered to them. How did you do it? Jiang Subin had asked Kang afterward. Kang had shrugged, looking as surprised as everyone else. I just asked nicely. It seemed lonely. That wasn't the strangest thing that had happened during the battle. Private Lim Soo-jin had walked straight through an energy barrier that was designed to disintegrate anything that touched it. She had emerged on the other side completely unharmed, her uniform not even singed. It felt warm, she had explained, later. Like walking through sunlight. The Zephyrian engineers who built that barrier had spent decades perfecting it. According to their calculations, nothing should have been able to pass through it alive. But Lim Soo-jin had walked through it like it wasn't even there. Corporal Han Bo-ra had done something even more impossible. During the battle, she had been cornered by a squad of Zephyrian soldiers. They had her surrounded, weapons raised, ready to kill her. But instead of fighting or surrendering, she had simply looked at them. Whatever the aliens saw in her eyes changed everything. One by one, they had lowered their weapons. Without saying a word in any language they could understand, she had convinced them to join the human side. They were still fighting alongside her, protecting humans they had been trying to kill just hours before. I don't understand what's happening to us, Han Bo-ra had whispered to Jiang Subin after the battle. When I looked at them, I could feel what they were feeling. They weren't evil, they were just scared and following orders. Back on Earth, the changes were happening everywhere. Dr. Moon Ye-jin was working in a laboratory when she noticed that gravity seemed different around her. Objects would float when she wasn't paying attention to them. When she concentrated, she could make things move without touching them. The laws of physics are suggestions now, she told her research team, trying to make a joke, but nobody was laughing. They had all seen her lift a 2-ton piece of equipment just by gesturing at it. Colonel Shin Jae-wook was experiencing something similar during a meeting with Earth's military leaders. As he spoke about battle strategies, the holographic displays around the room began responding to his thoughts instead of the computer controls. Maps would zoom in on areas he was thinking about. Data would appear before he asked for it. The machines are reading my mind, he realized with a start. Admiral Thexvar watched these reports from his flagship, his four eyes wide with terror. His scientists had been studying the humans for months, trying to understand what was happening. To them, the results were frightening. Their brain activity is increasing exponentially, Dr. Velthar reported. Neural pathways that were dormant 6 months ago are now more active than our most advanced computer systems. What does that mean? Thexvar asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. It means they're evolving, sir, but not naturally. It's like something inside them is waking up. Something that was always there, just sleeping. The evidence was overwhelming. Human soldiers were now instinctively understanding alien technology that had taken the Zephyrians centuries to develop. Human diplomats were inspiring loyalty from alien species just by talking to them. Human engineers were improving Zephyrian, machines without understanding how they worked. Private Yun Tai-ho had been captured again, but this time something different happened. The alien prison cell designed to hold him simply opened when he approached it. The locks disengaged, the barriers dropped, and he walked out freely. When questioned, he said the prison had told him it didn't want to hurt anyone anymore. They're not using technology, Crixon reported to Thexvar. They're communicating with it. The machines respond to them like they respond to us, but more willingly. Thexvar stared at the tactical displays showing human victories across the solar system. These weren't military victories won through superior firepower or strategy. These were something else entirely. The humans were becoming something beyond what they had been. And with each passing day, each challenge they faced, they were growing stronger and more impossible to understand. What have we awakened? Thexvar whispered to himself, watching as another Zephyrian base simply surrendered to a small group of humans who had asked it nicely to stop fighting. Deep beneath the surface of Zephyr Prime, archaeologist Nex Thule brushed centuries of dust away from ancient crystal storage devices. The underground vaults had been sealed for so long that most Zephyrians had forgotten they existed. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and the High Council needed answers about the humans. These crystals are older than our entire civilization, Nex Thule muttered to himself as he carefully connected the ancient devices to modern reading equipment. The technology was so old that it took hours just to figure out how to access the stored information. When the first holographic display finally flickered to life, Nex Thule gasped. The images showed beings that looked almost like the humans, but there was something different about them. They seemed to glow with an inner light, and the space around them bent and shifted as they moved. The creators, he whispered, hardly believing what he was seeing. The records told a story that no living Zephyrian had ever heard. The creator species hadn't disappeared or died out as everyone believed. They had made a choice that seemed impossible to understand. We have grown too powerful, the recorded voice of a creator explained in the ancient hologram. We can reshape reality with a thought, create worlds with a gesture, inspire entire civilizations to evolve in moments. But in doing so, we have lost something precious. We have forgotten what it means to struggle, to grow, to become more than we were. Nex Thule watched in amazement as the hologram showed the creator's decision. They chose to limit themselves, to take physical form and experience life as mortal beings. But they didn't want to lose their divine nature entirely. We will seed one world with our direct descendants, the creator continued. They will carry our essence within them, but in dormant form. Only when they face great challenges, only when they are pushed to their limits will their true nature begin to awaken. The crystal showed images of a small blue planet, Earth. They will face hardship and struggle, war and conflict, but each challenge will unlock more of what they truly are. They will rediscover their divine heritage not as a gift, but as something they have earned through growth and adversity. Nex Thule's hands shook as he activated his emergency communicator. High Council, you need to see this immediately. Meanwhile, on Earth, Colonel Shin Jae-wook stood before a group of surrendering Zephyrian officers. Something had changed in him over the past few weeks. When he looked at the alien prisoners, he didn't see enemies anymore. He saw frightened beings who had been following orders, trying to survive in a universe that suddenly didn't make sense to them. We're not here to hurt you, he said, and somehow every alien in the room understood his words perfectly, even though he was speaking Korean. Dr. Moon Ye-jin felt the change too. She was working in her laboratory when she realized she could sense the thoughts and feelings of everyone around her. Her research assistants were worried about their families. The security guard outside was homesick. The alien prisoners in the lower levels were confused and afraid. "I can feel what they feel," she told her colleague, Dr. Park So-young. "All of them. Humans and aliens alike." Park So-young nodded. She had been experiencing something similar. "When I touch the alien technology now, I understand not just how it works, but why it was built. I can sense the emotions of the engineers who created it." Captain Lee Dong-wook was leading a rescue mission to save human prisoners from a Zephyrian ship when he discovered his own changing nature. The alien vessel's security system should have been impossible to bypass, but when he placed his hand on the control panel, he felt the ship's artificial intelligence respond to him like an old friend. "Please help us save our people," he had asked the ship's computer. The AI had not just complied, it had seemed happy to help. Doors opened before the rescue team reached them. Life support systems adjusted to make the humans more comfortable. The ship even provided maps showing the fastest route to the prisoners. Back in the Zephyrian archives, Nexthul made another discovery that sent chills through his body. The crystals contained predictions about what would happen when the Creator's descendants fully awakened. "They will not seek revenge or domination," the ancient record explained. "That is not their nature. Instead, they will remember their true purpose. They were meant to be gardeners of consciousness, helping other species discover their own potential for growth and transcendence." The hologram showed images of various alien races, including the Zephyrians themselves. Each species had a spark of something greater within them, a potential that had been dormant for millennia. "Every intelligent species carries a fragment of the Creator's essence," the recording continued. "But most have forgotten this truth. The awakened descendants will help them remember." As Nexthul watched these ancient predictions, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Zephyrian soldiers who had spent time around humans were beginning to experience strange changes. They were becoming more creative, more compassionate, more willing to question orders that seemed wrong. "The humans aren't conquering us," Nexthul realized with growing wonder. "They're awakening us." The truth was both terrifying and beautiful. The war hadn't been about territory or resources. It had been the catalyst needed to awaken humanity's divine inheritance. And now that they were remembering who they truly were, they would help every other species in the galaxy do the same. The age of gods walking among mortals was beginning again. The Great Assembly Hall of Zephyr Prime had never hosted anything like this before. Admiral Thexvar stood with the entire Zephyrian High Council, waiting for what they believed would be their final judgment. The humans had won the war, and now, they had come to decide the fate of the Zephyrian Empire. But when the human delegation entered the hall, something felt wrong. Thexvar had expected to see conquerors, victorious warriors ready to claim their prize. Instead, he saw something that made his 4 eyes widen in confusion. The humans looked peaceful, not the peace of the defeated, but the calm of beings who had found something greater than victory. Ambassador Ryu Junho stepped forward, and the massive hall seemed to grow quiet around him. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but somehow every being in the room could hear him clearly. "We did not come here to conquer you," he said simply. The words hit the assembled aliens like a physical force. Thexvar felt something stir inside, his chest, an emotion he hadn't experienced in decades. "Hope." "Then why are you here?" asked High Counselor Zekmar, her voice trembling with confusion. Captain An Mi-young moved to stand beside Ryu Junho. As she did, something impossible happened. The ancient creator ruins scattered across thousands of worlds began to glow with warm, golden light. Zephyrians across the galaxy looked up in wonder as monuments they had ignored for centuries came, alive with energy. "We came to remember," An Mi-young said, "and to help you remember too." Dr. Moon Ye-jin approached one of the Zephyrian scientists, Dr. Velthar, who had been studying human prisoners for months. When she looked into his eyes, he gasped. For a moment, he could see himself as she saw him. Not as an enemy or a captor, but as a being with unlimited potential for growth and wisdom. Every species in this galaxy carries the same spark, Moon Ye-jin explained gently. The same potential for greatness. We were just the first to remember what that meant. General Baek Ho-sung walked among the Zephyrian military officers. These were beings who had spent their lives following orders, fighting wars, taking territory. But as he passed by them, something changed in their eyes. They began to see war not as conquest but as a waste of the precious potential that existed in every living being. The Creator's image isn't about having power over others, Baek Ho-sung said, his words reaching every corner of the vast hall. It's about helping others become everything they were meant to be. Thexvar felt tears running down his gray cheeks, though he couldn't understand why. What's happening to us? He whispered. You're remembering who you really are, said Colonel Shin Jae-wook. He walked over to Thexvar and placed a gentle hand on the alien admiral's shoulder. You were never meant to be just soldiers and conquerors. You were meant to be explorers of consciousness, seekers of wisdom. Across the hall, other Zephyrians were experiencing the same awakening. Science Officer Crixon suddenly understood that his passion for ancient texts wasn't just academic curiosity. He had been searching for something deeper, a connection to the divine mystery that ran through all intelligent life. Archaeologist Nex Thule looked at the crystal records he had discovered and realized they weren't just historical documents. They were a map showing how every species could evolve beyond their current limitations. We tried to conquer you because we were afraid, admitted High Counselor Zekmar, her voice breaking with emotion. We saw your potential and it terrified us. We thought if we destroyed you quickly we could go back to the way things were. Private Kim Jin-ho, who had spent months as a prisoner, walked over to one of his former guards. The Zephyrian soldier flinched, expecting punishment. Instead, Kim smiled and offered his hand in friendship. Fear makes us forget our true nature, Kim said. But it's never too late to remember. The transformation wasn't limited to the beings in the assembly hall. Across the galaxy, members of every species were feeling the change. The awakening of humanity's divine nature was creating ripples that touched every corner of known space. On distant worlds, wars stopped as soldiers on both sides suddenly understood the meaninglessness of violence. Scientists made breakthrough, discoveries as their minds opened to possibilities they had never considered. Artists created works of beauty that brought tears to the eyes of beings who had never cried before. What happens now? Asked Thexvar, looking around at his transformed people. Now we learn together, said Ryu Junho. Humans aren't meant to be your rulers or your teachers. We're meant to be your companions on a journey that has no end. Captain Lee Dong-wook gestured toward the glowing ruins visible through the hall's great windows. Every species has its own path to awakening. We can share what we've learned, but you must discover your own way to become who you truly are. The war was over, but something far more beautiful was beginning. Across the galaxy, beings who had spent millennia fighting and competing were starting to remember that they were all part of the same cosmic family. The age of gods had not returned through conquest or force. It had returned through the simple recognition that every conscious being carried within them a spark of infinite potential, and that spark was finally beginning to shine.